You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by HomeField Apparel.
Saw the games,
physical basketball
and I was at the games.
versus
You were
physical
there.
fouling.
You watched them on YouTube.
Anyway,
I saw the games. I watched the games.
Well, we're here. I'm Bob Moats. Welcome to X's and Joe's, a podcast dedicated to decoding the winning formula in college basketball.
And I'm Mike Wiemuth. Welcome you to episode 23. Is momentum a real thing in college basketball? Recorded on the morning of Sunday, December 22nd, 2024. So, Bob, that football game.
Ooh, all right. You're gonna get a piece of the rant. Okay. I don't want to hear about punts. I don't want to hear about
Mm-hmm.
hear about, should you have been there? No, I don't want to hear about any of that crap. Here's what I want to hear. It's like 11-2, best season in Indiana University history. You made it to the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
You deserved to be there. You lost one game to an Ohio State team that, by the way, I think the last time people from Ohio did something to some people from Tennessee that badly, they were burning Atlanta.
Yeah.
I mean, Sherman and company were there.
Yeah.
Sherman was from Ohio.
Yeah. I was thinking of the Battle of Buffington Island.
Ooh.
The only battle ever to take place during the Civil War in the state of Ohio.
In the state of Ohio, yeah.
It was a massive, and it was all Tennesseans going up to Ohio. And
that's better. See, I was just having this imagining of Sherman marching through Georgia, running into the Tennessee volunteers several times and just kicking the crap out of them. But that's a much better one.
Yeah. we'll post the information about that on the show.
For those of you playing at home, we can do that. But no, I mean, seriously, it's like, you're looking at all, and now, okay, granted, we have the luxury of 36 hours after the game to be able to say, look at what everybody else is doing, and it kind of sucks too.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us should be surprised that would be the response of these first round games, that you're not going to see a bunch of nail biters.
Sure.
That there's such a stratification. And Mike, we're going to quickly hit this because, this is a show about decoding the winning formula in college basketball, and we have a whole litany of stuff to talk about. But it goes back to talent.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be really, 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 really good and still there's another step you can take.
Right.
And can you explain because we were texting a lot through the game, even with various friends of ours, and you were explaining this. So I'm going to put you on the spot on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just analytically, even years ago, I was doing some research and I was trying to explain, why does college basketball have these huge upsets, like in the tournament, especially? How does an FDU beat number one Purdue? How do you get these 2 versus 15 upsets? But you don't see anything nearly like that in college football. And I was trying to actually answer the question, what is the primary driver of that? And the basic answer is talent, but not just talent all across the board. The biggest divider between not just the top and the bottom, but the top and also
top.
Yeah, exactly. The difference between the number 1 through 5 team versus even the 15 through 30, it's mostly the front 7. It's the talent differential in terms of the offensive and defensive line is just so stark between the Ohio States and or the Nick Saban versions of Alabama and everybody else.
Right.
And so then, we were talking the next step, if you're a program like Indiana, where they are, well, obviously, they have really good talent, let's say at the skill positions. Rourke is a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
Surratt is a great wide receiver. Pons is a great cornerback. The really next step in the evolution for IU to really start challenging those upper tier teams is that you really have to have huge upgrades to the offensive line.
NFL talent on the O line is what you're saying.
Yeah, and the thing is like you may not necessarily get exactly, let's say, the level of talent of like a Michigan or something like that.
Right.
But you can at least close the gap. If you can get the
Iowa.
gap from being this wide down to maybe like that wide,
then you can let your skill positions jump in.
Yeah, and exactly, and all the variance basically goes down enough to where, yeah, if you can hold. If you can hold off the defensive rush for, let's say, an extra half second,
that would have been all he needed.
The huge
that would have been what he needed. Yeah,
exactly. And that's kind of where I said IU is like the next step for IU is just upping the level of talent and ceiling for their offensive line.
And I think for us as we're going through this conversation, going into the football offseason. And yes, it does have a basketball impact as we kind of talk about what the next couple of recruiting classes and going into portal when the portal conversations are starting as well. Those gaps, when you think about those gaps for a minute and you think about just how stark they are, because I mean, at one point I referenced the old, like one of our favorite topics where we want to go back in the past is watching those old Big 8, now Big 12 teams, specifically Nebraska and Oklahoma.
Right.
And them flying down to the Orange Bowl, the old Orange Bowl that's, of Super Bowl III fame.
Yeah.
Going into the Orange Bowl and getting obliterated by either Miami or Florida State. Yeah. I mean, the Florida teams are just beat them like rag dolls.
Yeah.
And these are still really, 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 really good Big 8 teams, Big 12 teams. Yeah. And they deserve to be in that game.
Right.
But the matchups were just so poor for them at that moment.
Right. Exactly.
This does not, and I think I used that comparison and I stopped myself and said, but it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, and Nebraska under Tom Osborne, and then I think, eventually figured it out. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma, Switzer went to the Cowboys. Right. But the Big 12 teams figured it out going into the 90s that they just needed a few tweaks and a few little upgrades here.
Exactly.
That the fullback was still important, but they needed better tailbacks.
Yeah.
That the line itself needed to have more mobility than just having guys that could just go 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
You could look back in the 90s at the 40 times of the players, and you can see the point at which the defensive end recruits for Miami and Florida State, their 40 times were faster than the quarterbacks 40 times at Oklahoma, Nebraska. That's when everything
kills you. In a triple option offense, you got nothing.
Exactly. It's like you cannot run those guys on the boundary now. They're faster than you, so you have to do something different.
You have to do something different.
Yeah.
So that gives us kind of where, and let's face it, Kurt Cignetti is not, everyone talks about James Madison, which is impressive. Yeah. Everyone talks about, was it Elon was the other place he was?
Yeah, is it Elon and Indiana University of Pennsylvania were the other schools.
But let's look at him as a coordinator and who he worked for. I think he understands what Division I high-powered talent needs to look like.
Yeah.
He knows what he needs. Now, can he land it? That's the real question. Can he get it here? But if you compare this to where this has been throughout the entire process, every day he said what he set out to do, he's done. So, I mean, this is not an embarrassment is what I'm saying. This was not an embarrassment. This was not 56-7 of Purdue and Earl Hannaford throwing an end over end pass in the fourth quarter. It's straight into the wind. This is not that. This was a different type of thing. You lost to a Notre Dame team in South Bend.
Yeah.
And we didn't score as much as we did in 91. But they didn't score as much as they did either. So to hell with it. Yeah. Everybody just chill out. Don't turn this into some sort of thing like we do sometimes in the state of Indiana. Like, well, we're just terrible. No, we're not. We were 11-2. We were the 10th best team in the country. That doesn't happen very often at Indiana University. In fact, I don't think it's ever happened. Yeah. I mean, at least not since, I don't know, we dropped the bombs on Japan. So, let's call it what it was.
Yeah.
That's my rant. I'm done.
That's great.
And basketball's still playing too. I don't know if we know. Yeah, they're still playing.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, it does feel like it does feel like God was really running IU through the ecumenical gauntlet this last month, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, first we spent November in a pitched battle with the Southern Baptist,
Yes, we did.
only to
Yes,
be
we
thrown into the ring with the Roman Catholics in December.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's like these are your trials, Indiana.
Yeah.
It's like we came out of Sinai after 40 years, 60 years. We came out of Sinai. Oh yeah, you're gonna have to fight for your country now.
Yeah.
What?
By the way,
What are you doing to me?
Yeah.
What are you doing to me?
Yeah.
Which is actually, I think, what happened. If you really look at the Pentateuch, that's where we are. It's like, yeah, come out of the wilderness, and oh yeah, you got to go.
Here we
Yeah,
are. Yep.
yeah, you got. Now here's another trial for you. Let's make sure you're worthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I get it.
It was fun, but yeah, I'm sure like in the off season we'll have some updates on recruiting and things like that. But
and we will do the football show again sometime. Look for that in August if you're interested.
Exactly. Yeah, I think next time we'll probably try to bring someone else on, one of our pals to discuss.
I like that idea. Yeah, just wait for the vaunted bat phone to ring, and it'll be Mike or me asking you to help out.
Exactly.
Speaking of the bat phone, and I don't know, HomeField, it's time for us to, I think we know that Christmas is here. Yeah. I mean, we're recording this on the 22nd of December, as Mike indicated. Yeah. And so you may not be able to get that last minute Christmas rush order, but we know that.
Or this could be for the late shoppers that really just need a rush order.
Yeah, and there are some places, like I think I've seen them at Kohl's, seen them at Rally House, IU Bookstore. You may be able to stick your head in, and if you find, as you're kind of looking in last minute for gifts, and you're at that point where one more piece of clothing, check out the HomeField brand and also looking at homefieldapparel.com, www.homefieldapparel.com, to just kind of see what's available. But at this point, we also know it's gift card season too. So as you're looking at what to get yourself after, when the person who doesn't know what to get you gets you the gift card, check out HomeField.
Yep. Especially those knit sweaters. Those look pretty sweet.
Those look pretty awesome. I mean, I'm waiting. I mean, yeah. So we're still, I'm just excited to see what Santa brings me.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we come back, we're going to start talking about what program momentum looks like. Like, what is that? And how can we explain it? How can we kind of go through it? And then kind of just going through it kind of in a sort of, 50,000 foot view of program momentum when we get back on X's and Joe's.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Wiemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So, Bob, momentum. This is one of those terms in sports I feel like we sort of take for granted. It's one of those that you hear a lot, but it's not really, I guess, analyzed critically. Like we know it exists, right? But we can't easily define exactly how it operates, or at least people tend to not sit down and actually discuss it at length.
It factors into the, do I know what obscene is? Who was the Supreme Court justice? Was it Potter? I can't remember the score.
Black. Yeah, said.
I know what vulgarity is. I know it when I know what obscene. I know what it passes. I know it when I see it test. And so it's literally, I think momentum has pretty much launched the entire AM radio sports world, Barstool, all of this whole thing of momentum, which it sounds a lot like CNBC and Jim Cramer.
Yeah.
Where up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. It's like,
exactly.
You're right. There hasn't been that sort of, let's look at this. Let's look at what's going on actually on the ocean instead of what's crashing on the shore.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like, I always compare it to, it's like when you hear someone say he's in the zone for anyone who's on a hot streak, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, what exactly is the zone? Like, can I see it?
Yeah.
Is there like an orange glow that emanates off of people who are in said zone?
Yes. So the NBA Jam, he's on fire.
Exactly.
When the ball went through, it was on flames.
Like,
and it was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Just wafting off of them as they made their 5th 3-pointer in a row.
Hitting from 3/4 court and everything.
It's on fire. I missed that game.
Oh, it's a beautiful game.
Yeah.
Really, no basketball strategy whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for our purposes, I guess, we try to define terms on this show. So I guess vaguely we could define momentum as like an event or series of events that lead to changes in conditions that impact the trajectory of a program going into the future. So basically, event A, B, or C happens today, which causes outcomes X, Y, and Z to happen sometime down the road. Not even cause, just maybe even just like nudge or tip in a certain direction. And yeah, if you think about it, like, just as, sort of like what sparks momentum, like all the drivers of momentum can be, pretty wide in terms of the options, right? Like you think the common ones I think fans think of first is, let's say, like a big recruiting win or some huge unexpected win versus a top 5 team, like early in a coaching tenure. You think about like the Watt shot, like Christian Watford's shot against Kentucky. That's like the perfect example of something that can help spark momentum. Or let's say like hiring a stud recruiting assistant is also a big one. I mean, just think about, we lost Frank Kendrick this week, unfortunately, to stomach cancer. And, he was a longtime assistant at Purdue, a great player at Purdue as well. We think about like, Bob, when we were younger, like at his hiring, I guess it was about like 1990, somewhere around there. Yeah, I think it was like right exactly 1990. He came to Purdue at the time Joby Wright was leaving IU. And you think about how huge of a change that was for Purdue. I mean, that was like one of the chief reasons that Purdue had that run of success in like the early to mid 90s. Think like the three-peat. It was all those recruits that Frank Kendrick came in and was able to secure for Purdue that, frankly, Purdue is kind of missing on sometimes in it's like the mid to late 80s.
It's one of those things, like if you study the Russian Revolution, everybody looks at that last scene where the Tsar gets his picture taken, right?
Right. Yeah, with the kids.
The seminal moment, the last family portrait of the Tsar done at the end of Kalashnikov's, basically.
Yeah.
But if you go back to 1904, you go back to losing to the Japanese, you go back to before that and the assassination of the Tsar's, I believe, grandfather. Right. You go after that to the actual continuation of World War I throughout what was going to become the Soviet Union by the Allies versus the communists.
Yeah.
All of those things. You look at this, so that's, I think, we always look at this, those seminal moments you're talking about are right here.
Yeah.
But like the Kendrick hire to me was kind of like, it was like the revolution in 1904, where have you ever seen the classic film Battleship Potemkin? It really is a good way of how the communists saw that time against rising against the Tsarists.
Right.
That it just kind of starts setting events in motion that would eventually lead to IU making a change in their head coaching position in 2000.
Right. Exactly.
That Joby and Kendrick, that polar shift.
Yeah.
Much like the Potemkin conversation, and that original sort of showed the first real cracks after a fairly big defeat, I might add, for the Russian military, which you could argue that at the end of the Cheney era was kind of a defeat.
Yeah.
I know that may take us a little bit down one of our great rabbit holes, but when you think about it, which is why we do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, would you kind of think that may just be the whole thing with that? There's so much that we're looking at this and we're trying to say from a very, you'll see that event.
Yeah.
But but at that event, it's like looking at everything from a much wider lens, unlike, let's say, a regression, which is it's a natural progression and flow of things, that you're going to have a good year, a really good year, and then you're going to go have a setback year. And then how do you bounce back? And and momentum may just be more that what the impact is versus what actually happened.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, you can look at it as like you can drop yourself in a point in history and you can just like turn around, do like a 180 instead of looking forward towards where you're at. You can kind of look back. It's like, okay, well, what exactly caused these things to happen? Like, how did we get here? And why did things X, Y, and Z happen? Well, because things A, B, and C happen like 1 to 5 years beforehand. So I think when you're analyzing momentum, that's kind of thing you sort of have to be mindful of, is that the things that, like when something happens in sports, it's not always the primary cause is not always the thing that happened closest to it in terms of time. Oftentimes it's something happened much earlier. But I think, in sports, we kind of like to think that the things that happen now are caused by things that are happening right now. Right. It's like it has to be something that's proximate to what we're doing. And that's kind of and unfortunately, like when you analyze it like critically, it's not always the case. It's like, oh yeah, remember they hired that one assistant like 10 years ago, and he's now built up this like huge reputation. And okay, yeah, and now the other school didn't have that kind of same coaching, let's say, relationships. And so yeah, so Team A has now got the advantage, and Team B is now sort of on the outs.
And it explains how Mao takes over in 40s, kind of the same thing. How Purdue three-peats is kind of a similar sort of dynamic in that conversation.
Right.
That it is a, looking at this like it is revolution, because in many respects it is revolution when you start talking about shifts inside the levels, like long-standing shifts inside the levels of performance.
Yeah.
A top 2% program to becoming a top 5% program to becoming a top 10% program.
Yeah.
And one day you roll out of bed and you realize that, well, we're all communists now. Or
exactly.
Yeah. Or wait, how the hell did Washington win? I mean, last time I checked, he was running out of New York City. If you're sitting on Manhattan in 1778, you may be trying to figure out, why are the British leaving?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting. Like if we think about it in terms of like a visual, and we'll pop up a slide here, and of course, as we say with every show, any slides we put up will be posting on the show notes for those of you who are listening on listen mode only. But so much of this of sort of like what generates momentum and what sort of causes its duration. It's really just it's sort of the actions and reactions of all the players that are involved in, let's say, in and around a college basketball program. In this example, I just have a slide demonstrating all of the potential actors within a program. You have like the coaching staff, the current players, fan base, recruits, the school's administration, the basketball community. That's like the AAU and high school coaches in the larger area, the news media, and donors. Like all of those people are watching the games and the recruiting and all the let's say the events of a program. They're watching that unfold in real time, and as they're observing that, they're reacting to events in real time. They're changing their behavior based upon what's taking place. And as that's happening, all the other, let's say, actors are watching the other actors behave in a certain way. They're watching them change their behavior, and then they're changing their behavior in response to that.
As I'm looking at this, the question I have is, now that we're in a world where we can, quote, tweet at people.
Yeah.
Has this become this looks different than it did, let's say 30, 40 years ago.
Oh, sure. Yeah. If you think about it, like I've always said that social media, especially, it's an accelerator of momentum, irrespective of the direction. Right.
It's a turbocharger. It's fuel. It's a much better fuel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You think about like if you're a program, let's say you're in the honeymoon of a new coach, and people ask, well, is social media good or bad for a program? If you're like a big time program and you're in the honeymoon, you absolutely would love to have a big fan base that tweets a lot.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's a flip side to that. Well, the worst scenarios you can be in is if you're at a big program with a big fan base and your team program staff is underperforming, then that the acceleration goes the other direction. You're basically you're adding jet fuel to the rocket that's pushing the other, towards the direction you definitely don't want to go.
In other words, it's kind of like, again, it's like when the rebels go get an Air Force sort of thing.
Right.
Or the TV station. Why in a coup do the rebels always go for the TV and radio station first? This is the reason.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to have control of that, because if you don't, it can definitely hamper your impact of being able to,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I say that, if you think about like momentum, it really is mostly perception, right?
Yeah.
It's like it can't be measured. I can't sit here and tell you exactly what I can't give you a number for the buzz within a program.
Mm-hmm.
We can obviously measure the impacts of it. We can say like, okay, well, as this team is improving, they're getting this percentage of, let's say, top 50 recruits, or they're getting this many tweets about their program within a week. Those things are kind of measurable, but like the actual perceptions and feelings that people have about a program in real time, it's very difficult to ascertain.
As I'm thinking about you saying this, I'm going back over the decades and seeing those moments where everything seemed like it was just perfect. It kind of starts off like, if you think about a Dateline NBC sort of thing, they had the perfect marriage until he ended up, with a hatchet in his chest.
Yeah.
And, and the whole thing, the whole 15 minutes is how everything looked perfect. But what you saw on the surface was great. But what you saw underneath it, it was the cracks of the foundation were getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
And that's, I think, part of it also is that, the buzz can even be really positive, but then you start kind of noticing that maybe the enthusiasm isn't as fervent, or there could be, there are multiple, I think the web does a great job of showing multiple things as people are reacting to each other, what's actually going on.
Yeah.
That there could be some of this very positive buzz that actually turns off recruits.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it can be setting a ceiling for you if you're thinking about Butler, in 15 years ago, certain high level recruits, because maybe hearing the buzz around the program being, boy, the scrappy group out of Indianapolis. Well, if Butler's trying to up their profile to a top 50 guy, and they're not top 50 guys, if you're a top 50 guys, you're like, it's kind of like Purdue's kind of in the same boat. Would you agree that it's kind of some of that too? That some of that sort of, I may have sent you the elf thing.
Yeah.
Remember the Caleb first?
Yeah, Caleb first. Yeah. He did his elf impersonation.
The final year, it's cute. It's funny. It's like,
yeah,
I have my opinions on it. And at the same time, I just kind of thought,
yeah, I would not send that to Montverde. Let me put it that way.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, I mean, would Ron Harper Jr. or Senior think this is a good idea?
Yeah.
Or, Caleb, the other Dylan Harper.
Yeah.
Would he be like, boy, that looks like fun. I'd like to be a part of that, when it's like, this is, what are they doing?
You're right. Different cultures, different internal program dynamics and cultures.
Regions.
Exactly. There'll be different. Yeah, you're right. There'll be differences in terms of how that will be received.
It's like, you guys are a bunch of dorks. And I know one thing about being a dork. I've been one for years.
I think it's it's one of those things that's cute, and obviously because it's tradition now. He's been doing it, I think, like every year since he's arrived. So it
goes to a great cause. It helps a great cause.
Absolutely.
All of that's true. All of that's true.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you look at a vibe around a program, and if you're looking to get that extra step up, or you're maybe looking to change your culture just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you ran into that too in the 90s as well a little bit. That just, you could kind of smell the stale coming out of certain corridors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're right. Like there's a level of incrementalism also in momentum, right? Like I think like one of the big myths or fallacies that you kind of get with fans when they talk about it is this idea that, well, all good things and all bad things will be happening all at once. Is that like if one good thing happens, what do you oftentimes hear? The floodgates are going to open. We got we got recruit X. Now we're going to get recruits Y and Z and recruits A, B, and C.
Right.
And the reality is just doesn't work like that. I mean, you think about think of an IU example. And the IU is having that great run around with, Cody Zeller, and then the 2012-13 run of kids where he had Yogi and all them came after.
The movement. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff was going on, and IU was just kind of just hitting home run after home run in terms of their offer rates with top 50 kids, except Gary Harris. As I remember, people are shocked. Oh my God, Gary Harris didn't come. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, look, you can have a great run, but yeah, even amidst a great run, you can have a whiff, and yeah, it can hurt you. So it's not every, and even when a team is in rapid decline, you can be missing on recruits left and right, but you still might pull out one really good recruit here and there, even as you're falling down the mountain. So it's,
right.
so it's good that people understand that there's a level of nuance to momentum, that it's not always going to be 100% or zero. Sometimes it's going to be 85, 15, 80, 20 kind of events.
I'm sure the Tsar had a couple good days on the battlefield fighting the Germans.
Exactly. I'm sure on his birthday he had a good time.
I'm sure on his birthday he had a pretty good day. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure Batista had a couple days right after Christmas before New Year's that he actually felt like he had some optimism.
Exactly. And if we think about this, just looking at looking at examples, I think the most common example most people can picture in their head is what happens after you have some recruiting success. And I put here just an example of a positive momentum example. And this kind of illustrates, what we saw in the prior slide in terms of how people see things and how people react. So if you think about in a sequence, and although just to note, it's not always a perfect step A, step B, step C sequence, but I think people just visualize it a little bit easier as a step-by-step process. So let's say you have some kind of recruiting success. You hit on, 2 or 3 really good recruits. That eventually leads to some kind of team performance spike. You get those better players, team starts winning a little bit more. After that, you get some media and message board buzz. The local papers writing nice articles about you, and your 24/7 or rivals or whatever fan message boards are, let's say 10-1 positive in terms of the messages about the program. Attendance rises, NIL and donations increase. You get some positive buzz within the basketball community, which again, high school AU coaches are starting to say nice things about the program.
Ant Writer Jeff Goldman says
exactly. Yeah, on Twitter now, you actually have an expansion of what the basketball community is, right?
Yeah, Trilly Donovan put you out there saying you're a cool kid now.
Yeah, exactly. Because back in the day, that used to be the quiet channel, right?
Say the quiet part out loud, right? Yeah.
Well, it would be I'm hearing from sources within the AAU community that ... And that was always what you would hear, let's say in the early 2000s before you had Twitter.
Right.
Yeah. And you had that kind of momentum going within the community. Then you get obviously stronger staff and player retention. People want to stay. Coaches don't take that other offer from the other program that they've been eyeballing. They actually want to stay within this program because they feel things are going well. And same with the players. And all that creates positive game day environment. So you just get bigger crowds. And so, when you bring recruits to the game, they see a full arena where everyone's cheering and happy. And all that in total contributes to the perception of momentum, which is, you say buzz, vibes, juju, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And all that sort of like folds back on itself and leads again to more recruiting success. So this is kind of what you might see as the sort of the loop of activities that can contribute to momentum. You have success, people notice the success, they all see each other reacting to that success, and it creates this perception of momentum and vibes, and it causes even more good recruits and staff to come into your program.
Grandma gets a lottery ticket, wins
Yeah.
$1 million, and 6 months later is broke. And what I'm saying with that is, you would think that the buying of the lottery ticket and her collecting that $1 million check from the state of Indiana would, or state of wherever, Wyoming, would be enough, right? You would think that would be the big thing, you know, that will change your life. Well, it did, but maybe not, because I'm thinking as we're looking at this, like team performance spikes.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting right now at Florida Atlantic, if I'm sitting right now at Fairleigh Dickinson, I just saw them play a minute. They lost to Minnesota yesterday. 2 years after they beat Purdue in the first round of the tournament. Indiana State, you may hit a performance spike, and it's like, oh wow, Grandma won $1 million. Let's all go on vacation for 6 months.
Exactly.
And then before you know it, Grandma's, you've maxed Grandma's credit cards out because we forgot how much the taxes were going to be, and we realized we probably shouldn't have, like, I don't know, had a steak dinner at St. Elmo's every night.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here with momentum, that this is a more sustained sort of thing, because you can say, well, the performance spiked, so that recruiting's got to come now, right?
Yeah.
Well, if there's nothing coming in to replace, and if everybody literally like leaves the program the minute after the season's over, which you can now do in the portal.
Yeah.
Or even the head coach decides to go, I don't know, take a job at St. Louis or Michigan. That makes a difference, right? I mean, that's kind of where I'm going with this. That as we're looking at this.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's some incrementalism to this that is even counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like when the AAA team gets that really, really hot prospect. It's like, oh man, this is awesome, until the major league team calls the kid up, and it's like, oh man, well that was fun while it lasted.
I've actually had that conversation about, the last month. We were talking about this in the show yet, that we had that last month of the season. That in the last month there was a AAA organization actually would complain that the club was trying to bring up guys while they were going for the AAA World Championship. Why are they taking our guys away from us when we're trying to go for the AAA Championship?
Yeah, exactly. Don't they understand what we're trying to do here?
They're killing our momentum. I mean, we can hang a AAA banner. They're seeing if these guys can play Major League Baseball. That's kind of the point of why you exist.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, actually, the franchise then changed affiliations, and that was one of their main reasons. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Are you nuts?
Yeah.
I'm sure that prospect was just saying, boy, play Major League Baseball or win a AAA championship. 99 out of 100 of them would probably not pick you.
Yeah, exactly. And I question the sanity of that 1 out of the 100. So
I would too.
Yeah,
I would too.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you look at this, again, there's level of nuance in it. Obviously, I mean, I show this as a sequence just so kind of people can see and understand like how things can kind of happen as a cycle, but a lot of this is just happening in real time. I mean, everyone's reacting and creating buzz and vibes about the program. It's that, they see things, and especially like you said, Bob, with social media now, I mean, the creation of buzz can be instantaneous. Like one really good thing happens to your program, and then all of a sudden, like within 5 minutes, you're trending. And everyone sees, oh man, what's happening at Michigan? What's happening at Indiana or North Carolina? Whatever it is that can now, with social media, accelerate the momentum either direction, depending upon what's happening. If you look at, so that's like the positive momentum example. We also look on the flip side. So the negative momentum example would just be the opposite of that. So you have like, let's say recruiting failure. You miss on a few key recruits over a period of time. Then you have the performance of the team eventually drops because you don't have as much talent as you did before. You have the obvious media reaction and message board anger that comes from that. Media starts writing articles. What's happening with Team X? Why are they in decline? Obviously, the message board reaction is very instantaneous. That happens literally as the game is going on. Fans are starting to say, okay, where's the coaching hot board? Let's start thinking about the new guy that can come in and save us.
Is Coach X on the hot seat? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then from that, you get all the other things that tend to follow. Attendance plummets, NIL donations decline, or sometimes they get redirected to other sports. You start to get heavy negative basketball community chatter. All the coaches, AAU and high schools, like, yeah, things are just bad there. And definitely starts to have an effect on the players and the staff that are at the school. You start to have spikes in transfers and also staff looking for more stable positions at schools with a little bit better situation in terms of the coaching stability. And all that tends to lead to a negative game day environment. And sometimes if it gets bad enough, not only do people not show up, but the people who are there start booing. And I've said on previous pods before, I think I've talked about this before, but booing is like the last stage event for that you typically see at a lot of schools in terms of the tenure of the coach. Once booing starts and it sustains for a while, then yeah, that's usually a very bad sign.
So these are the bread riots in St. Petersburg.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if
exactly.
you're booing and all of a sudden, that's kind of the equivalent of houses are going to respond. And when the army comes out and tries to quell that, and then they turn their guns on you, when the soldiers flip around and join the booing crowd, then it's over. Like, it's at that point your regime is coming to an end, and that's kind of more. Now, granted, the negative momentum, because over time it's like, how much perpetual revolution can you go through? Because this, I think, kind of points to the thing of, this isn't just necessarily in the course of a season. You start noticing how this can probably over the course of decades start really, like,
Right.
You look at DePaul. It's a great example of this, where if you 50 years ago, we name a drill after George Mikan because Ray Meyer came up with a drill to teach. Everybody uses this at every level, at least at some point. And now you think of DePaul basketball, and we're talking about, can it resurrect itself from the ashes?
Right.
It wasn't that Ray Meyer to Joey Meyer, it was 2 years, and they had a couple bad classes, performance drops, and now DePaul is a middle program that can't win anything. It goes from independent to the Big East, and now they're just perpetually in the bottom because after 1 or 2 seasons of bad, no, it was a steady decline of momentum continuing to not get flipped to the point where it wasn't like the plane did this, it was the plane did that.
Yeah.
And there was no runway for it to land on.
Exactly. There's like a parabolic decline that happens with some of these programs. That's not a crash. It's just a very slow bleed out.
One day you wake up and you realize that Party City is no longer going to be in business. And where are you going to buy that? No, Party City's gone. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear that.
Party City is bye-bye. I mean, I guess they're all closing up. They're all liquidating like tomorrow. They become Circuit City'd. Yeah.
Wow. Now they're just going to be like the Spirit Halloween every October.
Spirit Halloween is going to be like the large.
The Spirit Halloween will be the last, like, after Armageddon, that'll be the last thing that's still like, keeps popping up every September.
My last meal of milk duds as the zombies are ready to take me over.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you kind of think about, or Big Lots in Indiana is going away.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a metaphysical impossibility. I think that the last ones are closing. So you start kind of doing this sort of, it's almost like corporations dying too, to a certain degree, where it's not like one day you roll out of bed and all of a sudden, they're gone.
Yeah.
It's more of a, like, it's not like Kmart, just died overnight.
Yeah.
There is a long standing, and the trends push you a certain direction, and that negative momentum, just doesn't, it's not like a boom bust sort of thing. It's not like pets.com what was it? Was it pets.com was the one that was doing Super Bowl ads, and a year later they were gone, and there was nothing.
Yeah, it was like the during the
.com bust. Yeah.
Yeah, you had all those companies that were like something.com, and they all like lost like their valuation like overnight.
It's like Hitchcock. It's like Hitchcock's Lifeboat. What happened to everybody else on the ship?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the Poseidon Adventure. There's only 5 tickets off this boat, and it's through Gene Hackman, who's not going to make it either. Amazon lives. The rest of you go down with the ship.
Exactly. Just follow Shelley Winters.
Just follow Shelley Winters. Man.
Yeah, and so yeah, thinking about the example and all that. Again, like the positive momentum example is just the inverse of that. So all the bad vibes within the program just creates the negative buzz within the program. The perception, again, the important part, the perception of the program as being weakened. And then that sort of like bends back on itself through more recruiting failure, which again leads to more bad performance, and all of the anger sort of like cycles back again. So yeah, and if you kind of run them together, like side by side comparison, you just see that they're essentially just like mirrors of each other, just mirror opposites. So the recruiting success versus recruiting failure, team improves versus team worsens, happy fans versus angry fans, attendance up versus attendance down. I mean, these are almost step by step. You can sort of track this out as being the same path, just the complete 180 opposite of the outcomes in terms of the sequencing. And if you think about like, maybe if we take an example, let's say like Cody's, like using an IU example of like Cody Zeller, like Cody Zeller commits to IU, let's say November 2010.
Yeah.
And to think of all the things that kind of came about because of that. Yogi Ferrell commits to IU 12 days later.
Yeah.
And that was like, I'm usually always say that package deals are very rare in recruiting.
Yeah.
But that was one that was very much like, it was kind of understood that if Zeller committed to IU, then it wasn't like the reason Yogi came to IU, but that was the last straw. It's like, oh, Cody's going. Yeah, I'm joining now.
I'm in.
Yeah. And you remember like the media and message board buzz that came about because of that one commit. Yeah. I think Mike Pegram said that was like the lead up to the announcement of Zeller committing. Like that day he committed, I think that was like the all-time message board activity record on Peegs.com.
I believe that.
Yeah. I think like that day, like the actual number of people logging in was the most on that day of Zeller's commitment.
I mean, and yeah, that's a great metric to use there, because I think in many respects that actually kind of shows what we're talking about too, which is it wasn't like, Zeller rolled out of bed that day and decided to do this, and then that was the thing that pushed everybody. Right. All the work that went in from Mike Davis leaving the program,
yep,
to that moment.
Right.
And you even go further back, like why Zeller, not Sean May? Why Zeller and not 10 other people during that time frame? Why was it Zeller that gets that moment where his two brothers would be a great example.
Right.
Why was Cody at IU and
Tyler at North Carolina?
And then Luke up in Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Why did that? There's something there. And, I think for us, as we look at momentum, that's kind of the whole thing of, you look at this, like you would look at, if you're talking about performance regularly, you talk about they won Cody Zeller.
Right.
That's a performance metric.
Mm-hmm.
The momentum portion is asking the wider question of why does Cody pick IU?
Yeah.
How did that work versus his two brothers versus Sean May? Yeah. And then eventually versus give me another guy after that we were supposed to land somewhere between him and Romeo Langford.
Right.
Give me another Indiana recruit that guy that we missed out on. Not Gary. Trying to think of someone. Michigan State. Help me out.
James?
Huh?
Dom James went to Marquette.
Go with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that's so that momentum, kind of looking at the waves, at the longer waves versus the short spikes that are inside of it. Those little energy spikes down in the
Yeah, and it's also like you can look at these things as these events can be both triggers and indicators at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So like Zeller, like you said, Zeller going to IU triggers things that are positive.
Yeah.
Other recruits coming in, the media getting happy, ticket sales go up. That's another thing that like happened there.
Yeah.
Those are all triggers, but it's also an indicator. It's like, okay, well, this also indicates something about the health of the program. If people are making this decision, if Cody Zeller commits to this school and his parents say, yes, go to this school, even after his brothers went somewhere else, that is an indication in itself.
This is working. This is working, even though this team is terrible right now and they're not winning.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about, and then you have that happen. And then I think it goes, Zeller committed the year that IU was at 12 wins, and then there are 27 wins the very next year. So 15 win spike, principally because of him.
The watch shot happens basically 13 months after.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly 13 months after. So you have that as like, the example of like a positive scenario of momentum. And on the negative side, you could like use like your example, like Sean May. Let's think about that one. So May commits to Carolina in October 2001, I believe. IU ends up with Daryl Pegram at that spot, who scored, I think, 2 total points in his whole time at IU.
I think it was 02. I think he actually committed in 02.
Was it? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know he came in 02, but it's, well,
maybe because I thought it was after IU went to it was that May's recruitment was after. Okay. Somebody correct this later, but whatever it is, you're right. Go ahead.
It was around that time, yeah. And instead of, you think about that like Final Four run, instead of having, let's say, a smooth transition out of the Final Four run with Sean May like as the
feature,
anchoring the post. Instead, you kind of a bottoming out. You went from whatever the 25, 26 wins of that year down to like 14 and 15 wins, like 2 years in a row. I think they had like 14 wins and 15 wins back to back. And one of the chief reasons that those teams struggled so much is that they were so depleted in the front line.
Right.
I mean, remember AJ Moye was actually playing power forward at some point during those years, and 6'3" AJ Moye, might I add. So and then of course, remember early version of Peegs back then was just absolutely on fire. In terms of negativity towards the program, how could you lose him? And also like how could you lose him and not have a backup plan? And so all the goodwill that had been building up from that Final Four run. Like all the wind that was in the sails for Mike Davis had just been completely spilled after the events of missing on Sean May and then all the stuff that kind of like cascaded thereafter.
Well, and then you kind of look at that already it was not like his tenure started off with and we talked about this at length earlier. You want to do the one we did with Galen. It was a very unique situation because he was the guy after Bob Knight, and all of a sudden,
it's the Gene Bartow disease.
The Gene Bartow. Earl Bruce ran into a similar thing, although his burn was a little longer than Davis's.
Yeah.
And all the other factors with Mike Davis in that time frame, which led to him basically stepping down mid-season and saying, "I'm just going to finish the year out and go to Birmingham. It's a better fit for me or my family." Which is politely saying, we're going to go. We're flying to Moscow right now with the rest of the family because we want to take an extended vacation out of Damascus. Yeah. So it was one of those types of deals. We're going to exiled.
Yeah.
And but it goes back even well before that to, it was a transitional government with Mike Davis.
Right.
He had one real crack at this. It's similar to maybe other situations that we're very close to right now, where you can kind of tell when you look at it from a wider lens, looking at it retrospectively, that it was a transitional government, a transitional regime, that Bob Knight gets fired right before the season. The players basically make sure that they get them put in place. Davis and Treelor, they had enough success to justify a contract.
Yeah.
And then it just, because of because of that process, because the recruiting failure actually ended up doing it to them.
Right.
And it wasn't even really a failure as much as it was just guys learning on the job.
Right.
I mean, the May recruitment, after Jared Jeffries is in the program, they figured May would just come along. I think there was a lot of that logic, at least from a fan perspective, that, Scott lives in Bloomington. And at the same time, it's like, well, are there still the rumors about the big man saying, "Don't go"?
Yeah, no, there's nothing chatter about that.
That's alive. That's still alive. 25 years later, we're still having that conversation.
Yeah, and I've heard from people that say, yes, that happened, and I've heard from others that say it's overstated, but that's out there. Let me put it that way.
At the very least, there was some feeling of ill will towards Indiana University from some former alums and former coaching staff, that it wasn't like there was a warm and cozy relationship between Assembly Hall and certain individuals who were parents potentially.
Exactly. No, totally. Yeah.
You could say that, I think, justifiably.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead. Because it kind of one of those things where we're looking at this momentum thing that, what should have been a uniting moment.
Yeah.
Was really, yes, it was for that it's like winning a big battle or two here. And then all of a sudden it's like, but the family still is in a crappy place. The fan base is still very fractured, very divided, because maybe how something happened.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, yeah, you think about like everything we're talking about in terms of like how momentum drives a program. Almost everything we're talking about is just we're talking about people's emotions, basically, right? We're
Totally
talking about how people are reacting to something. Nothing. This has nothing to do with X's and O's. There's nothing about what kind of offense is being run. All this stuff we're talking about is literally just happening in people's brains. It's
Right.
almost like the brand effect for a corporation. What is the first thing you think of when you think of brand X? Whether it's Coke or Starbucks. Everyone has a perception of what a product is and what it represents them. Same with the basketball program. It's really no different. And so, and you can think of like buzz and momentum, all that. It's almost like a short-term version of branding, right? Like the buzz in a program is kind of like, what do you think of the program right now? Like, well, what's the vibe in the program right now?
I'm gonna quickly go back to some. I mentioned Kmart.
Mm-hmm.
So a few years back, somebody I know, friend of mine, dad was a longtime retail manager at Kmart. He managed Kmarts all over the Midwest. And I was sitting there, I was going, I think what killed Kmart was Rain Man.
Yeah, the movie, like the Dustin Hoffman character's reference to Kmart.
Kmart sucks, Ray. And
Tom Cruise is to blame.
Tom Cruise kills Kmart. That I think that there's a world, a place where he doesn't. Now, does Tom Cruise kill it? No. There were already multiple market fundamentals that were showing that Kmart, with Walmart's ascension,
exactly,
as the internet begins to start taking fire, as other grocery stores begin the sort of mixed construct that Kmart as the discount brand mark, you look at, multiple, like only one's going to survive, and it's probably going to be Target. Kmart's kind of in between Walmart and Target, in the marketplace. All that is true. But their chance of survival gets mitigated when you hear Tom Cruise look at Dustin Hoffman and says, Kmart sucks, Ray.
Yeah.
Like we're not going
Academy award-winning film.
I am never going into a Kmart, Raymond. You understand how this works. I'm not going into Kmart.
Yeah.
And you go, it's like from that moment, it's almost like Kmart becomes a punchline. The blue light specials.
Right.
It's almost like, oh, geez, this just feels dated. And they, unlike Target, which took over stores like Airway, and I remember you and I probably both remember Airways as kids.
Yeah.
They took over multiple of those little like areas. Or, Zehrs dies around the same time. All these different gimmicky types of stores die.
Yeah.
And you walk into a Target today, and it's not exactly, it's more upscale than walking into an old Kmart.
Right.
And that, I think, is what we're talking about with this momentum thing, right? It's like, there are these moments that you can kind of point back to, and you can kind of deconstruct where programs are going or where they've been. And unlike a Kmart, unlike a Western Union Telegraph, the telegraph industry, you don't really die. They just continue to linger on in zombie-esque sorts of modes.
Right.
Where a fan from another program may walk into the Holman Center and see a 79 banner and go, what happened there?
Yeah. Exactly.
That they may not even know.
Yeah, you can almost think of that example of with like Rain Man. That is pre-social media, but that would almost be like a memeable moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that becomes a meme, and then that spreads, and everyone sees on Twitter, "Oh yeah, Kmart sucks." Well, yeah, you could have that also for college basketball. Something happens within a program that is so bad or so funny that it becomes a joke, and everyone like spreads it. It's like, oh, look at that! Look what
the look at Tom Crean's face, looking like someone just like his dog just crapped on the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, well, think about like when Woody Hayes punched that Clemson player.
Yeah,
like think of social media happened back then. Like every recruit would have gotten that video clip of Woody punching that kid. And I was like, do you really want to go to that school and get the crap beat out of you by your own coach? So.
Right. Or no, or do you really want to play against, actually you're a Big Ten program, you're recruiting. Do you really want to go to Michigan and have Woody Hayes hit you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's killing everybody.
Yeah.
No, seriously, you're right. That memeable moment, or Mike Davis, we were going to talk about Davis briefly, like at that Kentucky game where it just felt like, boy, everything. Davis is a good example of momentum almost shifting in a matter of mere minutes.
Oh yeah, no, but I was at that game, and yeah, I remember it was tapping on his head to the referee, and I turned I was there with Cogswell, and I remember I turned to Brian. It's like, this is going to be a bad one. There's going to be repercussions for that one.
I'm watching him, and I'm watching an official, and I'm having this thought while I'm watching. Going, Bob Knight would have said, Bob Knight would have been like, he would have been on a bus back to Bloomington by that point with a police escort had he pulled anything even close to that.
Yeah.
But the official, as he's out there screaming at this official, the official's going, walk away. You see his mouth moving like that. And you're going, oh, this is going to end badly. Because it was still like a 2-possession game. It wasn't like the damn thing was over. I mean, it was still a game.
Yeah.
So that's all of these little instances, and you put them on the flow charts and everything, you can kind of start thinking back with whatever your applications are with college basketball, and knowing full well that momentum is a real thing. It's measurable qualitatively, maybe not quantitatively.
Right.
Maybe, and it is something where it when you see it. If you're feeling it, it's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
It's also not necessarily the loudest voice in the room necessarily. Sometimes it's actually how the quiet voices are responding.
Right.
That if in November of 2010, when IUS 12 wins, Peegs has his best day, Mike has his best day ever. It may not be what's happening right now, but it's more or less a leading or even lagging indicators versus real-time cause and effect.
Exactly.
So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some current examples of some programs with momentum trajectories. What is it looking like right now for a few programs? We're just going to kind of go into a couple examples and briefly kind of talk about them in this context when we come back on X's and Joe's.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Wiemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So, Bob, some examples of teams on the upswing or downswing, or teams that I guess we would say that have some perceptible notion of momentum currently. I know one you and I talked about because, well, we saw it firsthand last year, and we're going to see it firsthand again in a few weeks out here in Philadelphia. Penn State. Mike Rhodes. What do you think of him?
Surprised. And I'm going to take Mike Rhodes in context of Penn State since they've joined the Big Ten.
Yeah.
That if you look at the long view of momentum, Penn State has utilized their time going from an independent status institution to Big Ten status. A longtime doormat that has now leveraged themselves into respectability.
Right.
I think Mike Rhodes, when you think about Penn State being, and before Rhodes, it was Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
Penn State's a football school. Bar none, it's a football school. I mean, you know better than anybody. You're up there. I knew enough Penn State people to realize that they were probably one of the most obnoxious fan bases in the Big Ten. But what Rhodes is doing, he was a good. It's kind of like, it's almost like they're setting up their own version of the Butler way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's a culture that's being built there that's very identifiable.
And that may even transcend coaching changes. Like when you talk about how do you rebuild momentum? Well, usually it's you fire the guy up front and you try to buy yourself some time to a shift.
Yeah.
There are other things you can use too. But in this case, I think with Rhodes, they let Shrewsbury go because they didn't want to make the investment in him. They weren't sure. And it's like, if you're not sure, no wonder the guy's going to go to Notre Dame, which is, I think, a better job. But the question will be in 5 years if Mike Rhodes does this right, building on Micah Shrewsbury, even building on, who was the last guy before that? Pat
Chambers.
Pat Chambers.
Yeah.
You kind of go back through the years. They've had some decent teams and some decent runs there, but it now feels like it's sustainable going out of Chambers into Shrewsbury, now into Rhodes.
Yeah.
And it's not even from a tactical standpoint, like they're getting the right guys in there that can actually, with the players Penn State can get now.
Yeah.
They're able to now get them, because honestly, the Shrewsbury leaving for Notre Dame could have easily just driven Penn State right square into the ground.
Right. Exactly.
So that alone, Rhodes just being decent, being good, and being competitive, and now doing what they're doing now, it kind of shows that the accelerated process with NIL and especially the portal and everything else that's involved with this, Ace Baldwin is a hell of a player.
Oh yeah.
He's
probably maybe the best defensive guard, I think, in the country. That's, my opinion.
Highly possible. I mean, he'll make everybody look bad.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see them play when we're out there here in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited to see them.
Yeah.
Especially in what's pretty much going to be not a quasi. It will be a home game for them.
Yeah. Yeah. They returned a lot of the same guys that we saw last year when we took the trip to Bloomington. I mean, they still have like Kern, Hicks, Hicks is still there. Baldwin, obviously, is still the figurehead. Yeah. What's it, that Niederhauser kid, the kid from Switzerland? He's like 16. That kid is really impressive. Like, I think a lot of IU fans and other Big Ten fans have not seen that kid play. That kid is a absolute kangaroo in terms of his ability to jump. He's unbelievable. His ability to just alter shots, rebound way above the rim. And when having Ace Baldwin there also helps because he can do a lot of lob action. So they shoot really well. And I don't not necessarily even they shoot okay from the outside. It's just that they get a lot of layups and dunks.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that helps.
And they turn people over like crazy. They get a lot of steals. Baldwin has a lot to do with that, obviously, but the whole team, I mean, they're really locked in defensively. So they turn you over. They have good pace. I think they're one of the top teams in the country in terms of pure scoring. I think they're they're fifth. They're number 5 in the country in field goal percentage. So
Their adjusted tempo is 26 at 72 possessions a game.
Yeah.
So that they play, they play fast, and they also play fast even in the half court. They're shooting. I mean, their effective field goal is top 20. They're 18th at 57.4%.
Okay.
Defensively, they're turning teams over, almost a quarter of the time, which explains some of their tempo things.
Yeah.
They don't shoot the three ball as much as maybe you would think they would. They're shooting about a little more than a third of the time. Very high assist to field goal margin. They're sitting at 10-2.
Yeah.
And I think a bunch of us thought that when Mike Rhodes took over from, I believe he was at Virginia Commonwealth before.
Yeah, it was VCU, and I think it was at Rice before that. Yeah.
This kind of shows that, it's kind of a thing. Okay, well, Penn State's, they're going to be back to being a poverty program. They're done. They're back to the dustbin. You guys had your chance with Shrews. You got him where he needed to be. Move on. And now it's like, no, maybe he can keep this momentum going a little bit. And I would say at this point, if you're Kelsey, their AD
Kraft.
Kraft. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe you should extend him now.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it now. New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Hand him hand him your best offer and say, please, let's make your family work. Let's secure your family's financial future. So that, I think, Penn State's a really good example of a program that's been, with a newish coach through a coaching change has maintained momentum, or actually may have even increased and fueled their momentum a little further.
Yeah. It also helps. I think also it helps that they're at a football school for a variety of reasons.
You bring money. Bring money.
High money, low expectations.
That too.
Yeah.
Which that's
that's the best combination.
It really is. I mean, you can make that argument. You really can't make that argument at Michigan, for example, because Michigan has high expectations for everything.
Right.
Like, I think they have a tiddlywinks team in Michigan. They expected to be world champions. I mean, they are the champions or the cesspool of the world, depending on how you sang the fight song.
Yeah.
But, I think you can also make the same argument for Michigan with Dusty May right now. And you got to look at Michigan's momentum. And this is coming out of, I mean, they've always been they're one of those programs that you're not going to, if you see a massive spike down, it's going to get corrected real fast. Would you kind of agree? Yeah. Cause that's, I think, what happened with Juwan Howard, that it felt like they were okay. And then all of a sudden they had that quick spike down. And then you look back and we were talking about this earlier, reconstructing this.
Yeah.
When he, basically throws a punch at Greg Gard in a handshake line. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, that was a memeable moment.
It was a memeable moment.
Yeah.
And the cracks were already there. Like the Houston, that class that was, I think, was his first big recruiting class when he basically poached IMG.
Yeah.
There was a moment where you would think that maybe Michigan, if they don't fix this, much like Louisville, if they don't fix this, they've got to continue to make a change there. They go and they get Dusty May, and it seems like they've righted the ship, at least from a standpoint where they can now maintain more of a wave versus a spike.
Yeah.
Where they spike and just drop,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You think about the transition from Beeline to Howard, and Beeline was going to Final Fours and go to national championship games and such.
Yeah.
And, I do think like Michigan's always kind of had this thing that, we can get the recruits that we want. Mm-hmm. I think that was a lot of the push for getting Juwan in there is that they kind of want to recreate the Fab Five. I think because Beeline recruited well, but he didn't always quite get exactly like just the run of every 5-star recruit that he wanted. But he didn't really need it. But
there is another, and I think that some people may be able to decode what I'm about to say very quickly and very effectively. And I'm just going to be blunt about it, as blunt as I can be. There felt like a redemption. And sometimes I think that when you start looking, if your program's looking more backwards than forwards, if certain individuals inside your institution are looking backwards versus forwards, we need to redeem this important group of humans that did something special here.
Yeah.
We need to make this place special for them again.
Yeah.
And I think as we go forward in humanity, it's time for us to say maybe we shouldn't bring Bart Starr back to coach the Packers.
Yeah.
That there's a moment for us at looking at this critically, that when you have this conversation where the Fab Five naturally, and Jalen Rose has a very legitimate complaint about that program. And I'm going to sound kind of hot take-ish here, but I do think he has a legitimate complaint that they haven't really been recognized the way that they should have been recognized.
Well, because the Ed Martin controversy and everything.
1,000%.
Yeah.
All of it. But it's not those kids' fault. It's not those men's fault. You know, it wasn't really their fault necessarily that the culture was such that, and there were other programs doing just as awful and they just didn't get drilled. And a lot of it was, you know, the cultural change and but it doesn't mean, you know, you being relevant in the past does not mean that you are entitled to power in the future.
Right.
Do you want people who are legacies or do you want people who are grinders?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a question of momentum also, that if your momentum is rooted in that area where you're trying to protect something, protect it, we're trying to shelter it, we're trying to build, you're not building anything. What you're doing is you're just trying to hoard something.
Right.
And that's going to turn your momentum in a negative direction because everyone else now says, I'm going for your pot of gold because you're too busy looking at your pot of gold versus looking how what we're doing out here to get that.
Right.
That's what Juwan Howard, and I'm not saying this is critical of Juwan or anybody in these positions. It's more or less just an observation that as we're going through these next, you know, as we look at these situations, how you build momentum sometimes is how do you change your focus?
Yeah.
How do you appreciate something while at the same time not, you know?
Yeah, you can kind of navel gaze at your own history books of your own program very easily. But you're right. I think it's
special.
Yeah. You're right. That's such a weird one with Michigan because you're right. I mean, it's like you had this period of time that was very successful, but then got mired in NCAA controversy.
Mm-hmm.
They had to take down the banners and all that. And so, yeah, I could see from the motive of some of those guys like, you know, Jalen Rose, Juwan and all that. Like, yeah, let's get this back. Let's win. If we go out and win some championships again, this will be sort of like our project to like, you know, rehabilitate our name.
Yeah.
And Jalen, I remember Jalen said, it's like, yeah, Michigan, come on, we can go out there and get, you know, 5-star recruits again. And they did for a while, but then obviously just things kind of unraveled because, you know, Juwan, I think he made some really wise moves. I think bringing in Martelli was a brilliant idea.
Huge.
Yeah, because I mean, again, out here in Philly, like Martelli's kind of a god in terms of like the basketball community, in terms of respect for his like his acumen and all that. So I think he made a lot of good moves, but I think just overall is just, yeah, I think he may have been out of his depth in terms of just leading the program to try to be like a 20-year coach at Michigan. I think that was just not in the cards for Juwan Howard.
And in fairness, he has had some health issues.
Exactly.
I think that needs to be
totally
at least recognized that there's been some major health issues that, you know, can impact you in adverse ways. But I think that that's where, from a momentum standpoint, Michigan making the decision to rip the Band-Aid off when they did, bringing in a coach that they knew that, and again, we've talked every once in a while about coaching changes and just 180ing, you know, you go opposite of where you were.
Yeah,
going with Dustin
being an outsider.
Bring an outsider in, completely an outsider. That was something I think that who has a much different view of how things should be done than what I think Juwan did at that point, and even Phil Martelli did at that point.
Yeah. Have you watched Michigan much yet, Bob?
I've watched enough to know they're damn good. They're watched fun. Enough to they're fun. They're up. I've watched enough to know something else too, that Dusty has done a series. I think part of this is like when you watch when they're losing, it's just because I still think they're trying to figure a couple chemistry elements out.
Yeah.
They can literally play with anyone. It'll be interesting to see where they are in March, because they will have setbacks in the Big Ten. It'll be
Right.
interesting in the Big Ten. Will the grind get to them a little bit? They're
Yeah.
going to have some games that they're going to lose that are going to be completely unexpected. They may have a couple win. I don't think any win they have from here on out is an unexpected win. They may drop a couple here and there. But if they can be like the one team out of the Big Ten that goes from stinking pile of average to Sweet 16, Elite 8 good, which with the right draw, they can do that.
Yeah.
It's welcome back. And at that point, it basically shows that Michigan, by making a small tack, which in momentum conversations may just be you're getting rid of a coach and changing it out, they're able to continue to kind of keep on the upswing. Very similar to Ohio State did when they fired Holtman and they brought in his interim. Now the question is, can his interim recruit well enough to keep that going?
I would say if fans have not watched Michigan, watch Danny Wolf. Watch Danny Wolf, especially from Michigan.
Oh,
he's maybe one of my favorite players to watch in college.
Danny Wolf is what when you think about a big man. When you think about a big man, that's what Danny Wolf and that's what big men are going to be. Yeah. Right there, it's as things are going forward with lifted bigs. Danny Wolf was and it really isn't surprising for Michigan because Michigan has been for the last actually since even the Fab Five has been a program that's been very cutting edge in how they utilize big men.
Yeah, the Wagners.
The Wagners are a great example, or an amazing example of that. Teskey is a great example as well.
Right.
So, I mean, this is just, and I think Dusty's figured out how to flow him using 5 outs, and I mean, how do you guard this guy?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to, and let me assure you that if you just try to pound it into them, they're going to knock the crap out of you. They're a team that can stop you from pounding it, and then will use your pounding against you and will just blitz you. They'll just blitz right around you on the offensive end. You're done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that those are, I think Iowa State too with, Iowa State's another example of a team that's kind of, building back momentum. They've had times where momentum's been really good and then they drop off a bit.
Yeah.
I would say that, just briefly want to say that there are some long-term coaches that have actually kind of slowly built momentum at their program. I think Brad Brownell at Clemson has done an amazing job of, once Bennett started dropping at Virginia, it's allowed him to kind of, just because he's been there, he's been present, he's been continuously getting more decent.
Right.
He's probably hit it, what's the ceiling at Clemson?
25 wins, maybe. He's at 23, 24 wins. I think he's like 23, 24 wins the last 2 years. And
I think so.
That's really good at Clemson.
You could maybe see them right draw broken bracket hitting a Final Four.
Yeah.
That's the sort of program you could see that would do that. And then do they, at that point, it's a question. Brad's in his 50s now, I believe.
Yeah, I think I think he's in year 15, I think, at Clemson in terms of his tenure. And he's a little bit older than 50. I remember I actually watched his last high school game. He was Calbert Cheney's teammate
at Harrison.
At Harrison. And their last game was the Holman Center in like 1990, I guess, 89, 90.
Would have been 89 because, Cheney's freshman year was the 89, 90 year.
Yeah. So, I remember watching Brownell, like I think they lost in like the regional semi or something like that at the Holman Center.
Yeah, they would have hopped up 41 to see you guys at that point. Exactly. Would have been regional or semi. I would bet it was a semi-state would be my guess.
Yeah, probably. You're right. But yeah, it was. But yeah, he's been there, for so long, and he's been one of those coaches that just kind of like at a football school, has got decent resources, fairly low expectations in terms of just overall output, and he's won enough above the line, let's say, of expectation at Clemson to be able to have some like bad seasons here and there, and just like keep sort of like chugging along.
And so much of this is we know regressions are going to happen. And the question is, like at a program like Clemson, a regression may hit you much, maybe a quick spike down.
Right.
And then the question is, have you built traditionally well enough to get yourself back ramped up to where you were before? And even if he doesn't get back up to 23, 24 wins to hit his ceiling, he may be able to retire out of that job and get like a locker room named after him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
Get the court named after him.
Get the court named after you. You might get your, especially if you do the final. Let's say you just luck out and you get into a Final Four. I mean, hell, NC State did it last year. There's always one that seems to just kind of pop in there. It's like, surprise, we're here.
Yeah, Frank Martin at South Carolina that one year.
Exactly. And then at that point, you just go ahead and retire and go to the booth and enjoy your money. And especially if you're sitting at Clemson, you just, I don't know, pack up your crap and go to either Myrtle or Charleston and just spend the rest of your time on Folly Beach. Maybe you do that for a while, but that's examples of sustaining momentum, of growing momentum, of being in the momentum. Not a hot take, not a boy, they're hot, boy, they're not. It's more or less you're watching what these it's not even a slow build as much as it's a matter of, okay, this is what momentum actually looks like. It's measured in seasons and even decades in some cases.
Yeah.
I would even argue, so you look at the ACC and you look at a program that we're looking at momentum maybe slowing down a little bit, which actually opens things up for schools like Clemson.
Right.
Newish coach. You look at North Carolina.
Yeah, with Hubert. Yeah.
That even before Hubert, even after Rory wins that title and has that regression year.
Right.
And he built back, and it kind of feels like maybe there was some slowness coming out of Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
That maybe it's slowing down just enough where it's going to be a notable, discernible difference where, as IU fans, I think you and I are very cognizant of.
Right.
It's a long goodbye, guys.
Yeah.
It can't be a long goodbye.
Yeah. Well, it gets to that. We had the pod, it was a few weeks ago. We talked about how much of the performance of a program is like the program brand versus just the dynamics of the current coach, right? Like the short-term stuff versus the long-term stuff. Like, well, which one matters more? And I've always kind of argued that a lot of the short-term stuff does have more impact. Like having a really hot coach at a mediocre program is better than having sort of like a kind of a bad to below average coach at a really strong program.
Joey Meyer.
Right. Exactly.
God rest your soul, Joey. Sorry, pal. But Joey Meyer.
Yeah. And so, it's like, the elite programs, the ones that are like, constantly number one overall, typically they're really strong programs, like historically, who also have really strong coaches at the same time. So we have both of those like check box, those two checked off, then that's basically the formula for having like an elite program. So you're right, like in North Carolina, obviously you can't get a better brand of in terms of like the association of a basketball program being elite than like North Carolina. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Hubert, I think he did pretty good job of like transitioning after Roy was there. I mean, he got in the national championship game. He's recruited decently well. But that's kind of been sort of like wavy here and there. But yeah, you're right. It's just like, can he keep things going at a program where the expectations are very high? Which again, if you're at a place like Clemson, where we're just talking about with Brownell, you could have like a 19-win season is not going to kill you at Clemson. That will kill you at North Carolina if you do it too often. And so that's why the line of expectations really plays a huge role in terms of how everyone is reacting to it, in terms of like the media, the fans, and all that.
And your overall win record doesn't always indicate anything, because I'm taking a quick glance at them. Okay, so they win a title in 2017, which has been 8 years ago.
Yeah, 7 years ago. Yeah,
7 years ago, 7 seasons. My math gets a little screwball. And that's after they had a second, in 2016. So second place to championship to round 2 in 2018 under Roy. KenPom, they've had 3 top 10 final, 3 top 10 in KenPom. You've had a 16 in KenPom, a 29, and then 34, 84, 43. You've only, Roy's last 2 years, they don't win 20 games.
Right.
And then and granted, one of them was a COVID year, one was a year after COVID. But in the COVID year of 2020, Roy was 84th in KenPom with 14 and 19, which at Carolina just isn't supposed to happen.
Right.
And yeah, granted, Hubert's 29, 20, 29, and now he's 7 and 5. But he misses the tournament when he wins 20 games.
Right.
It's not like the tournament performance, even though last year they were a 1 seed, they didn't get where they're accustomed to getting to. So that, when you compare that to a Kentucky and what happens with Calipari leaving Kentucky to go to Arkansas, and then Kentucky actually getting a surge in momentum with bringing in Mark Pope, you start thinking about this a little bit. Now, from a programmatic momentum standpoint, it's Carolina because of FOMO and programmatic FOMO.
Yeah.
Maybe like it's time to maybe look at this, especially if other traditional blue blood programs are moving.
Yeah.
Especially after Louisville cans Kenny Payne, especially after Notre Dame brings in Shrewsbury, and let's say Shrews goes and beats them by 20 at Joyce or something.
Yeah.
Something like that happens. Or they look at, programs like the, UCLA being an example too, where, they can, we got to just get a better bounce back is what it comes down to. Because UCLA is a program that, again, they may have had a bad year last year, but they may be their momentum with Cronin, and their momentum hasn't been awful the last 20 some odd years. They've actually had good years. It's just they haven't been able to kind of get it all these things fired up.
Right. And also,
you see where I'm going with this. It's like you're when you're a legacy program, your calculus and momentum is different than if you're Clemson. I think is what you're trying to say, and it took me 10 minutes to get there.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, and also you have to remember when you talk about like the tenure, Hubert's outside the honeymoon now.
Oh yeah.
And that's and I always spend way too much time. Both of us spend a lot of time talking about the honeymoon. The reason that's so critical, especially if we're having a conversation about momentum, is that one of the things that if you look at like the data over time about programs that ascend or descend, it is much easier to lose momentum than to gain it after the honeymoon.
Yeah.
When the honeymoon is over, it's the difference between like zero gravity and then like heavy gravity. Mm-hmm. It's like when the honeymoon is like, there's nothing really pulling you down. Everything's kind of either neutral or sort of like boosting you up in terms of how people are reacting. The media is very forgiving. The recruits tend to be much more forgiving. The fans are more forgiving during the honeymoon. Once the honeymoon is over, then it flips.
I got to get my guys.
What's going on? Why have you not hit this this level of the tournament, or why is your offense still stuck down in the 90s instead of being in the top 20? All of that starts materializing after the honeymoon is over. So this is the problem you get you're outside the honeymoon, you're at a program with high expectations, and you're not doing terribly, you're just not doing really where people are expecting you to be. And so that's where you can get kind of like these slow bleed outs, where you just sort of like ebb off the side of the page until people are just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is over. I think about Tubby Smith at Kentucky.
Yeah.
Like Tubby won a national championship.
Yeah.
But over time, it was just watching that program. It never crashed. There's never a time where anything just like completely
glide plane. Yeah.
It was like Tubby played that slow, the ball line defense. He kind of played a slower offense than what Pitino did. They slowly missed on just a few more recruits than they would have under Pitino. He had one or two bad incidents, like Derek Character experiment failed. And so you just had a few of these things like pile up until you got towards the end. It's like, okay, now we're like a 20-win program. We're not going to be able to get to the Final Four anymore under these conditions.
And Billy Donovan sitting at Florida.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's the other thing people really don't understand is that about momentum. When you look at it, if you compare over time, all the programs had momentum positively or negatively. It is much easier to gain momentum when your rivals are down. when your rivals are up, it's not possible. It's not this again, not a 100-0 sort of dynamic, but it's much easier to gain momentum and keep it if your rivals are just not quite where you are.
And like when you talk about, Brunell too, because rivalries like, Leonard Hamilton at Florida State, Leonard
Exactly.
Vaughn at Miami right now. Both of those programs are not where they were 5 years ago.
Right.
And they're at some point they're going to say, okay, it's time for you to take your mandatory retirement, and we're going to name a urinal after you or something.
Yeah.
But at that moment, you've kind of hit that level where, okay, there's space at the top. There's only so much space at the top, and that's the thing. What other people have got to, what fans again keep this in mind, that there's only so much space at the top, and it's a lot harder to break someone off of that on your own. You've got to kind of watch as things that that basically the momentum is, as momentum programs are carrying down, which is why you talk about programs like Carolina or Villanova. Similar dynamic there, except I think it's worse at Villanova because you can at least make a case for Hubert Davis. I'm not sure you can make a case for Frank Neptune.
Yeah. And also just resource wise. I mean, like, I'm living out here, like Villanova's right down the street from me here. And you'd be amazed. Like, I think people, if they came out and saw Villanova, like the campus and all that, it's like, oh, that's nice. It has a Notre Dame kind of feel to it. It's like a nice, well-constructed Catholic university in a, and this one, of course, this one's a little bit more in like a suburb compared to like where South Bend is. But yeah,
I'm not going to say it. You know how my feeling. You know my feelings on South Bend, and I'd apologize to you, but I make no apology.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. We saw the Twitter comments this last Friday. So, but no, like if you walked around campus, you would not think I'm at a huge basketball school.
Yeah,
there's not the vibe of like, whereas you go like, down Franklin Street in Carolina, you're at a basketball school. It's all around you. You cannot miss the iconography of the team that's around you. So you're right. So Villanova is just a little bit harder. Like, it's great if you have a Hall of Fame coach like Jay Wright that's kind of like driving the ship. And he's got a lot of power in those, sort of like a small boat like that. And he kind of like navigate the shoals, so to say. But if you don't have a Hall of Fame coach at a place like Villanova, then it's just an uphill climb for you.
And I mean, you could also argue, but again, you have a fan base so that's definitely going. We're comparing you to the last guy, and this was supposed to be a smoother transition. Like, I think that there's a belief that you keep your momentum going throughout that period, and you shouldn't see that big of a drop in performance. Yeah. Which, again, we were talking about this earlier. Like, if the plane is going this way, and then all of a sudden it actually reaches that moment, maybe you just maybe you fuel up and try to get the momentum to carry you around.
Yeah, exactly.
Do the full revolution versus trying to fight. Fight the physics, for lack of a better term.
Don't turn around before the moon. Let's just let's just slingshot around the moon and just
Apollo 13-101. There you go.
Yeah.
And that, I think, becomes kind of the question there, because I think, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of shift our run sheet because I do want to kind of get us, maybe to another quick break, and then we'll talk about Indiana and all this, because I think that maybe that's segment 3, because we know what it's going to take to shift programs. It's coaching changes, it's NIL drive, it's administration, both university, institutionally. The revenue sharing question is now on the table too, of how do you invest? Would you take an investment on a guy that's not really performing at your level? How do you shift momentum? Sometimes it is fueled by money, coaching, or personnel changes, money. I don't think you're going to see anybody building a $275 million basketball facility anytime soon.
Right.
I think the days of them building these massive palaces to weight rooms and stuff are over. Yeah. Because if you're a kid going, oh, this is nice, but what's your NIL package look like? Well, here's 75 cents and a buy one get one free offer at the Triple X root beer stand. That's not going to do it anymore. So I guess when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about how Indiana, what momentum right now looks like in Indiana, and be as kind as we can in their Christmas season. When we come back on X's and Joes.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Wiemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So, Bob, our little Indiana Hoosiers. Yeah, so we're talking about momentum, and it's interesting. Like, do you remember what was it like several months ago? I think you and I got to jump on the AC pod. And do you remember that day? Well,
Oh, I
or
do.
what happened that day?
That was the
prompted our-
McNeely. That was the Liam McNeely
Yeah,
day when McNeely said, "I'm not coming."
exactly.
And was it a post? No, because I can't remember if it was a post game after Minnesota, but Minnesota was
Minnesota game. I think they won the Minnesota game, but they lost. Their one high school recruit.
the poetic victory of poetic victories. It's like, congratulations. It's kind of like watching Empire Strikes Back or something. Hey, they got off of Cloud City.
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Someone's arm and lightsaber still there, but
and that's kind of you think about that like framework. Remember what
we had to have the conversation of what would it look like? Where is the pony in the pile of crap? And you're going to hear me be talking about ponies a lot because the joke is Reagan tells the story of the optimist being, there's a guy that's shoveling horse crap in a barn. And why are you joyfully doing this? Because I just know there's got to be a pony in here somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think the point that we were both, and I referenced it yesterday on assembly call, was that you hit the nail on the head with what would the recruiting class have to look like,
right,
or the transfer portal class have to look like. I think some people would see that as, well, Indiana can just do Indiana things, and we can put a bunch of money into NIL, and we can do whatever we need to do, and can we get this? In reality, it was kind of how this season is going to go. They're going to have to look at some leading indicators, and what would be the transfer portal class, right? That was the first thing. Yeah. IU pretty much hit their marks on that,
right?
At least from a standpoint of what metrics we look at to say, okay, do you have a fighting chance or not? But then you saw, okay, well, at the very least, they're also looking to try to stabilize on the high school recruiting front. So in one area, your sales were up. In one area, like you're killing the Canadian, you're killing the North American truck market, for example. Oh, I don't want to use that one, do I? A little close. You're hitting this, these sections of your business are up, but you're losing out on what could be considered your projected future.
Yeah.
And Grant, you hit the Sicily recruitment, but losing Harrelson and Mullins. And then you go into, I think you and I, even after that day, we started having the conversation of our first indicator that will be maybe a leading indicator as to where this is going to go is going to be Atlantis.
Yeah.
And then the start of Big Ten season. And doesn't really look like the thing. It's not leveling is what we're trying to say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think at the time, and I think the metaphor we used was where they were in terms of the position. And I said, look, just based upon the history of looking at all sorts of programs over time, like when you have a 50 plus Ken Pond drop after the honeymoon's over.
Yep.
It's a very bad spot to be in, just in terms of like the survivability of the staff. Mm-hmm. I think the time I said, like, you can get out of it because NIL is available. The portal's available.
We'll find a way to do it.
Yeah. I said, like, it's possible.
It's easier than it was. It's more tenable than it was. Not easier. It's more attainable.
Exactly. And I think I said, like, it's like hitting a 6 leg parlay.
Yeah.
Like it's possible, but you have to hit every part of the parlay. And parlay isn't necessarily like each leg is one recruit. Maybe like the recruiting is just like one part of it.
One part of the parlay.
Talent. Like the talent is one part of the leg. What about the fit of the players? Is maybe another part of the leg. Well, how do they, how they fit together? Do they mesh with the offense? Does this guy mesh with that? So I mean, it's like the point is that it's not even just like getting the talent was just like the minimum threshold. There are other things you had to hit, to make all that work. And obviously, like right now, you look at it and you think like, okay, I think they hit the talent leg the parlay, but it seems like some of the other legs are really like unstable right now.
If you use our poker example, like, or it's like shooting the moon example, card examples, like this was an outside straight draw. This was a shot. This was an all-in outside straight, and you had to hit and then the other guy flips over, and you're not exactly in a strong position, is what I'm trying to say going into this thing.
Yeah.
Or you're trying to shoot the moon at the end of a Hearts game, during a Hearts game, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm seeing my cards, and as a way to do it, and it's possible, but the math really isn't in my favor.
Yeah.
We talked about this. I think it's easier to drop now than it is to rise, to be perfectly honest, when you start talking about where you are as a program.
Right.
Like 50+ point drop that drops you from, you were Mike Woodson and company were a top 5% program 2 years ago. They've dropped from a top 5% program. They dropped last year to a middle of the 4th tier.
Yeah.
Like you're getting close to Power 5 programs cannot be in the 5th tier, which is the bottom 2/3 of college basketball.
Right.
So if you're close to the bottom, of the top third in college basketball, and you're a program like Indiana, you're not going to be there long.
Right.
You better fire up quick.
Yeah.
And going in early season, when you start looking at metric sites saying, okay, the AP says you're a top 5% program. The metrics say that you're a firm tournament team.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't been coming to fruition. There's a question of momentum there. Like your momentum has definitely slowed. And if it's an all-in bet and you don't win it, it's an all-in bet and you don't win it.
Yeah, exactly.
It is what it is. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you're still drawing. There's still cards to be played.
Yeah.
And I'm hinting at this too much, I think, in the last 36 hours. But I think it needs to be said at this point going into the first third of the season. Whatever your instincts are telling you may be correct, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And all these things, people, I get messages here and there, especially whenever you get towards, it's funny, whenever you get at this stage of like a coaching tenure, I get these little messages from people. It's like, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going on? And I always kind of say the same thing, is that nothing is ever guaranteed. It's just that the math gets really steep the deeper you get into these things. Like there's nothing that says X will 100% happen. It's usually not that. It's more like option Y goes from being like a 10% possibility down to like a 0.001 possibility. And that's the way to think about it. It's just you get into scenarios where you need miracles to start happening the deeper you get into these kind of declines when it comes to coaching tenures, especially if you're at a program that has the kind of expectations and resources of an Indiana.
But I think going back to this, and I'm going to shift back to momentum.
Yeah.
You can still have a good season and doesn't really discernibly shift your momentum. It's kind of like Crean's the year before Crean's last year.
Yeah, or Mike Davis's last year.
All that.
Everyone forgot that Mike Davis actually went to the
tournament.
Yeah.
It is, it's even Denny Crum towards the end. You kind of like have that moment. AJ Foyt at Indianapolis his last few years, where he would qualify 4th.
Yeah.
And everyone gets excited, and then
and then he's cursing on ABC Sports.
Yeah, sports, on a variety of different topics, and it wasn't always Kevin Coogan. It's Coogan, But there are moments where that momentum is, the question is, okay, now you may have stopped the bleeding. Maybe you go on a 10-game win streak in January and things feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Maybe you win 6 out of 10. It was unexpected based on Ken Palm.
Yeah.
Oh, we're surging. But then you look at the next. But see, at that point, it's like in any sort of revolution. We've held the rebels at the gates of the gates of the palace.
Yeah.
When will they show? When will the rest of our army show up? Until you look out and you see your generals out there basically leading the rebels now.
Yeah.
Because the because then the other question becomes, don't just be fooled by one or two events here or there. A lot of it's going to be, what are your fundamentals look like? Like, well, are you getting more? What's your recruiting profiles look like? Are you hearing more about the transfer portal?
Yeah.
Like last year at this time, we were hearing there's opportunities for IU in the portal. So you start listening for a program in those areas.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we're kind of giving, I guess what I'm trying to say here is if you hear this, it's not meant to say that I'm not going to speak for you, my friend, but
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound like I'm draconian. I'm just saying, watch the next month, watch the next 2 months, follow your instincts, understand that this is not just a 1 or 2 off thing. That at this point, we're talking about larger kind of looking, try to take a couple steps back and separate yourself, I think, from anything that the way I'm looking at this is I'm separating myself from, we know what we know now. So we don't need to really relitigate it.
Yeah.
Look at what's going forward. Look at what's in the pipeline versus what's already happened. And know that if you start hearing things that have happened in the pipeline before, the more stuff you start hearing, the more it's kind of pointing to what you're saying with the booing.
Yeah.
Like when the radio station starts, when you see Imelda Marcos's shoe collection on Filipino television.
Yeah. Or when Soviet TV starts playing Swan Lake.
Right.
Yep.
You got it. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
all of those things. Or you start noticing, you start hearing about mysterious illnesses throughout the Politburo. That's another one of my personal favorites, like the coup has failed sort of thing.
Yeah.
When you start noticing at the end of this that there's a weird sort of like, things just appear to be like it is a Twilight Zone episode, or you get the sort of the weird stories.
Yeah.
You don't have to believe them, but just know that their existence and the fact that they're getting traction right now is an indicator.
Yeah.
Of what Mike and I were talking, what Mike was showing with the negative buzz.
Yeah. Yeah. All this stuff, these things go in patterns, and
They do.
It's like it's weird from my perspective is that when you do this actually as kind of like an avocation, you do it over time. A lot of stuff just kind of looks, I hate to say,
Normal.
Yeah, it looks pedestrian.
Normal.
Oh yeah. That checkbox. Yeah. Oh, that's what's happening with the media. Okay. Yeah. That's what's happening with the fans. Yeah. That's just routine to these kind of scenarios. And I think what we try to do on this show, obviously, is like, we're not doing advocacy. We're doing more information. It's like, just be prepared, because we're giving you sort of a perspective of, this is how things tend to work. We're not saying this is exactly how things will work, but this is just the patterns that we see when we look at the numbers and the data and the history. And so do with it what you will, but it's good to be, it's better to have information beforehand than after it's over.
Spirit, are these the events that will happen or could happen?
Yeah.
As we sit here at this holiday season and think of the great Ebenezer Scrooge and the great message of, yes, we can change.
Yeah.
Things can change. And whether it's, and that's, I think, what I'm going to kind of close out with on my thought on this, because you're exactly right, Mike, that it's kind of showing what this actually looks like. And it's not, we're saying something's going to happen. What we're saying is these are kind of, these are your probabilities. But I would say that at the end of this, that we're talking about, sometimes you have to separate CEO performance from corporate health.
Right.
And if some of the stories you're hearing that, when we talk about a Michigan, for example, or even a North Carolina, as to what's happened since this, with momentum, you can, we're not talking, I think when Mike and I will have these conversations later about, okay, so is the 4-year expectation too long now? Because 2/3 of our coaches in college basketball Division I are in year 0, 1 through 4.
Yeah.
Are in 0, 1 through 4. No, I mean, we're not really sure how that's going to look, but we know what this is going to look like, which is, what we know is going to look like is that a program's not necessarily the same thing with one or the other.
Exactly.
So I'm going to go ahead and kind of just wrap up. And I know Mike's, I'm going to say that we want to give a special thanks to our good friend Bob Thompson for the music and sound of the show. And special thanks again to John Ringer of ringdesign.com for designing the logo and look of the show. And thank you to all of you that have listened this year. This probably will be our last show of 2024.
Yep.
Although it's highly possible we might just hop on and do the next one next weekend, or before I show up and before I crash Mike's house and drop his real estate values for
exactly
before I do damage to Philadelphia.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. I can't wait to come and you'll be your first experience at the Palestra, Bob, to see the
cannot wait
game. Yeah,
cannot wait.
It's special. Yeah, looking forward to episode 24. We will have a special guest. Jared Morris from Assembly Call will be coming to join us to talk about program expectations, how they're set and how fans and the media react to those expectations. And so, we'll look for that probably about 2 weeks' time somewhere, unless we jump on early to do a quick pre-New Year's one. It'll probably be maybe the week after. So look for that then.
We'll see.
And I just want to set a special remembrance. We lost, unfortunately, one of the IU greats this past week. On Monday, we found out that Dick Van Arsdale, unfortunately, passed away. Of IU All-American, former Mr. Basketball in Indiana, and longtime Phoenix Sun player and executive. I think he was actually they call him the original Sun because he scored the first points for the Phoenix Suns when they first became a franchise. So, yeah, it's a little close to home because my dad actually has been friends with the Van Arsdales since they first met. I guess it was like the early 60s at the SAE house in Bloomington. That's back in the crazy days when players could actually join a fraternity. So my dad was actually Tom Van Arsdale's fraternity father. So, they've been close. And the Van Arsdale family is just, you cannot have a better IU family, just overall. I mean, not just like the twins, but I mean, Hilda Van Arsdale. I mean, there are pictures you could see of her after the twins left. I mean, she was still going to games, and you see her sitting next to the Knight family. It's just, just the consummate IU Hoosier family. And so I think it's important to recognize that. And here's a great little factoid. That SAE house back in, let's say, like 62, 63, around there, they had two Van Arsdales, and you had John McLaughlin there. That's 3 NBA All-Stars in one fraternity house. At the same time, like the Celtics were winning the championships back then, they had 3 NBA All-Stars on their team as well. So literally, an IU fraternity had the same like basketball capacity as the championship-winning NBA teams back then.
That's awesome. And that's out of what we thought, 7 IU players?
Yeah, I counted. I think like IU's had like 7 or 8 NBA All-Stars play at their school. I mean, you have like, Isaiah Thomas, Victor Oladipo, you go back to Bellamy, McGinnis, but then it's like, the Vans and John McLaughlin. So you have three of like the 7 or 8 NBA All-Stars ever played at IU all were at the same fraternity house at one time. So that just shows a different world that basketball used to be back then. But yeah, we just wanted to send a special note to the Van Arsdale family and wish them all the best in this time of remembrance. And we will be posting some videos of Dick Van Arsdale on the show notes, and so you can see what he was like as a player and as an executive for the Suns. So until then, this endless conversation was brought to you by the Back Home Network. Be sure to check out all the great BHN content, including Assembly Call, Doing the Work, Right Up Meridian, The Dribble Drive, and Crimson Cast on YouTube and BackHomeNetwork.com. So until next time, I'm Mike Wiemuth.
I'm Bob Moats.
Have a good one, everyone.
Merry
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year. Happy holidays.
Exactly.